Good evening and welcome to Literature Live, Brightness of Books. This evening is brought to you by Kotak. This is a series we've been doing now for the last 8 or 9 months, where we bring authors and their new books to you, in the hope, and I'm sure that hope is not unfounded, that books and literature will relieve some of the gloom all around us. Today, I'm very pleased and honored to have Meghnad Desai, better known as Lord Desai, who's written his autobiography called Rebellious Lord. Meghnad is sitting in his study in London, and I'm here in Bombay, and we are about to say hello to each other. Hi, Meghnad.
Hello. How are you?
So, this is your book.
I can match you, book
Yes.
for book. There we are.
And, you know, I'm known for the length of my hair and the wildness of it, but I can't compete with you. Even at the age of 80, you still have a head full of hair. That's pretty good.
Yes.
It's not a wig, is it?
No, sorry. Luckily, even as it is falling off, a bit of it stays up. So, it's not as rich as it used to be, or as black.
Right.
You can see some pictures in the book. But no, it's still there. It's all real and genuine.
Yeah. I suppose this is the lockdown and this period of the COVID, which has forced all of us to stay indoors, which made you sit down and write your autobiography. Am I right?
No, actually, the autobiography was written before COVID. I have to say that.
Oh.
I wrote it. I wrote it in 2019. 2020. Most of it. No, 2019. I wrote 2019, and I guess I submitted it to my publishers by early 2020. I mean, before COVID really hit, and that's how I remember it. But I love writing. Writing is very easy for me, and I just start. Someone says, "Why do you start in such a dull fashion?" I said, "I began at the beginning with my birth and just carried on." I didn't want to have some general philosophical reflections and stuff like that. I was just a story. It's a simple story. It's a linear story, and I enjoyed writing that. And then, of course, they had to set it up and all that.
Yeah. But the one comment I have about your book is that it's under 300 pages, which given the richness of your life, I think is inadequate. I think you could have easily made it 400 pages.
I could have. I quite agree with you. My first thought was that should I write? I want to write just up to my getting my title of Lord, and stop there. Because I thought I'll write another volume later on. But then I thought, oh, who cares? Who's going to read 2 volumes of my autobiography? I may as well. So I rushed through the years since House of Lords appointment, quite compactly. But yeah, I now know that I have left out some nice and interesting episodes of my life. I will probably write side books on specific things, my life in economics or things like that, which would be separate.
Yeah, you could do a follow-up book with your philosophical thoughts and so on.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good kind of supplementary book to
Indeed.
the autobiography. You should seriously think of that.
Yeah, I wanted to call my book "Could Do Better." But everybody said nobody would understand what that title means. So because in India nobody appreciates self-deprecation, which is a very British thing.
Yeah. So reading your book, you talk a lot about Baroda, which is now Vadodara, where you were born and where you grew up. So we have that in common because my early years I spent there, and it used to be a lovely town. It no longer is, but I also found that you were brought up in a literary family, and you call it an argumentative family.
Absolutely.
And is that what made you what you are today?
I think so. I mean, in a sense, it's. I don't remember any age when I could not read. Let me put it that way. There must have been time, but reading books, reading the printed word was the one common activity the whole family indulged in anytime they had. And we discussed books, we kind of, and some of my uncles and so on even wrote short stories, often on short stories and things like that. And so it's a very literary sort of household, but also politically lots of arguments, about everything, across party lines. There was no party lines. And I was very aware of not just Indian politics, but world politics from early on.
So were they left-leaning generally, or right-leaning, or middle of the road, or what was
Well,
it?
my father depended upon his mood. But my older brother was left wing when he was a student and so on. Then he became a civil servant later on. But he read all his life about what went wrong with the communist revolution, sort of thing. It's an agonizing thing. But we read a lot of politics and we read a lot of literature, not so much science or technology. And I was told, if you haven't read Shaw, you can't argue politics. So God, I had to read Shaw to argue politics. So I went and read Shaw. It was like that. Very much in terms of reading, there were no limits.
But growing up in a Gujarati household, and Baroda at that time was more Maharashtrian than Gujarati.
Sure.
So you must have learned Marathi as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So was your reading in English, or was it in Gujarati? Was some of it in Marathi, or?
No, I didn't read Marathi till I got to Mumbai, but I read Gujarati and English. I read English from the age of 6 onwards. And because, as I say, we were the only household in Baroda getting the Times of India. Literally the only household, apart from the palace. Apparently, there were 3 copies of Times of India coming to Baroda from Bombay. 1 came to our house, or 2 went to the palace. I don't know how anybody, but somebody told me this. And so it was, my father may not have been a rich man, but he had taste in terms of what he's going to read. So I read the Times of India from the age of sort of naught, more or less, And that was very educational, because I used to read a sports page and read about Glamorgan and things, Sussex and things like that, not knowing what all this was, and cutting photographs.
Yeah. I think all of us did. We knew so much about English county cricket.
Absolutely, yes.
And really, when you think about it, there was no reason why we should have, because we had no connection at all. So
no.
We all did. Yeah.
But cricket was a connection. It was amazing how, not football, not soccer, but cricket.
You talk of an incident where your uncle locked you up in a bathroom, and that was very traumatic. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it is as I said, people will say, what do you worry? What are you complaining about, God? For 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you get locked up in a bathroom, and you're not very, nobody's beating you up. What's on? But it is a very vivid memory I have. So it must have made a deep impression on me. I can still vividly visualize how I felt at that time. And because it stays in my memory, I just sort of, as an amateur psychologist, said, it must have mattered for me. So I better mention it, which is the only unpleasant incident in my childhood. I had to mention it because it must have somehow shaped me.
Because you also say that you developed a stutter, which is difficult to imagine now.
Yes, I do stutter, yeah.
And you put it down to the trauma of that particular episode.
Yeah. Well, I hope some skilled psychiatrist reads it and sees whether that's a good connection or not. But no, it happened, and I got cured by a psychiatrist who gave me which I'm very grateful for that. But having a stutter was a very, very peculiar thing. It made me speak extempore and all that, so there was some advantage to it. But that I remember.
I
Now,
don't
I may
see,
be over psychologizing it, but there we are.
yeah, but I don't see the connection. I read that in your book that to overcome your stutter, you took part in debates. But I would have thought that you would be shy of public speaking because of your stutter.
That's why I'm the other way around. If there's a problem, I'm going to go face it.
Okay,
And of
great.
course, all bright boys were supposed to take part in debates. We had, we had our whole jati was also very competitive about these sorts of things. So your parents would say, no, no, there's a debate and a caste debate. You got to go and talk about it. And then our aunts and uncles would help us.
Okay. And your speeches were written for you, or did you write them yourself?
Well, in my very small childhood, yes. But once I got into a school and I spoke at school debates and college debates, I did my own. And of course, my problem was that because of my stutter, I spoke extempore.
Oh,
And thereby more confused my listeners more than I confused myself because I spoke as I thought.
yeah.
And people say, what's going on here,
Given your interest in books, literature, and also films, you saw a lot of movies and
Yeah,
pictures that all
sure.
of us did, but particularly theater, because that you were very, very active in theater. I find it strange that you didn't go in and study literature. Why did that happen? And why did you go to economics?
Uh, You know, the pressure about jobs was so acute, in the 1950s for, middle class, middle class sort of boys and girls, uh, that you always thought, what what is a subject in which I will get a good job? And as I said, I did BA economics because I wanted to do Sanskrit. I was very good in Sanskrit. I got
Oh,
a distinction in Sanskrit in my intermediate year. But then the family said, no, no, Sanskrit, there are no jobs in Sanskrit. You just go and do economics. And then I also do MA economics because I found, oh my God, you do economics, you get a bank job. So, it's an acute pressure. Will you get a job or not? And ultimately, my fate was to do IAS, like fate of all sort of middle class sort of graduates. And I escaped that, but no, the job pressure was very acute. You didn't do what you wanted to do. You did where you got a job.
I would actually like to speculate on Meghnad Desai, IAS, and then he becomes Secretary to Government of India, the Finance Department. Do you think that that was possible given your rebellious nature? You would probably not have.
Yeah. I was, when I thought about it, I thought I will actually be so good, I would end up in the IFS. Somehow I thought, I would be that good. I don't know why, but given my devious ways of writing answers to questions, I may not have, but I may have done better in IFS than in IAS because at least I was more aware of the world at large already by the time I was 21. But no, I guess I could have been in the finance ministry, and I may not have been an IG Patel, but I wouldn't have been too bad.
And then you went to the University of Pennsylvania, Penn, as it is called,
And yeah,
to do a PhD. And from what I can see from your book, you didn't have any kind of butterflies in your stomach about going abroad and so on, because basically you were a small town boy, right?
Mm.
And then to suddenly jump into a foreign country on your own and so on, didn't you kind of feel that you'd rather be at home?
yeah, it was very interesting. As I said, when I left, as the ship was leaving Bombay, uh, I felt very liberated. I had all sorts of other young boys, as it were, who were moping and crying and missing their family. And I would say, "Hey, come on, let me let me explore this ship, go around, see what is where, and so on." And from the day one, I decided to eat whatever was being served on the ship. I had this kind of attitude, and I think being on your own is a very interesting thing because there are no support structures. And had I grown up in India, there would have been uncles and aunts and there. Then I was at 21 in Philadelphia. If any problem happened, I had to solve it. You couldn't call home because telephones weren't very efficient in those days. I had my limited amount of money I had to manage. That actually made me very responsible and mature. This may sound a bit of a boasting, but when I read Mahatma Gandhi's autobiography, I think here's a boy from Porbandar, which is not even an English-speaking town, comes to London at 18. How did he cope? How did this boy become Mahatma? But at the age of 18, he had no clue where to be. And so I think being thrown on your own devices was very educational for me, very maturing.
Yeah. Pen must have played a very important role in your career in terms of your development, right?
I think it was because partly I was very lucky to be able to get a fellowship to go abroad, which we would not have, and very nice that. But also, Americans accepted foreigners with open arms. There was no messing around. There was no racial discrimination. Nobody slighted me. Nothing like that. Everybody was helpful. And then I think it was. I joined this theater group. I fell in with this suburban theater group, which was an amazing experience. I suddenly knew, apart from my academic connections, I knew a lot of sort of ordinary middle class or prosperous middle class Americans. And most Indian students who go to America, they stick to fellow Indian students. They don't mix. I was mixing from day one, because that is what I wanted to do. And I think that was very advantageous. Philadelphia, both the academic terms stretched me very much, very nicely, and socially it was very good for me.
Did you find that your education in India, you're doing your MA, prepared you for the academic life at Penn, or did you feel that you didn't know enough?
I was well taught in what I got at Bombay, but Bombay was a little bit behind in terms of the latest developments in economics, which are sort of more mathematical and sort of technical, which I had to learn very quickly, very fast. So my real hard work. And again, I ended up overdoing it because I finished my PhD and my coursework in the shortest time possible at Penn. 21 months. I had a 4-year fellowship. In 21 months, I was finished. First to finish of my group. So, again, the attitude was like when I was stammering, don't run away, go plunge in and try twice as hard.
Right.
It worked.
Yeah. And if I remember an incident, your what is he called? The person in charge. Yes.
My supervisor?
He asked you about statistics, whether you knew statistics.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And you said, no, I don't know.
Yes. Yeah. Jerry Adams, yeah. One of the supervisor.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how did you learn statistics on your own? You really,
Well, I mean, I was going to lectures. I was working very hard, and that was the most difficult part of my work. Getting on top of statistics and mathematics was very. But luckily, my PhD drove me into statistics in an applied way. And I had the most sympathetic supervisor. He was a giant in the subject, got a Nobel Prize. He more or less knew I knew nothing, and he would not admit it, and I would not admit it, and he just guided me through step by step by step. So I learned more doing that than I learned in my lectures. But it was an amazing experience that he just knew precisely how to take me to the next step, guide me through it, and he would just say, "Go read such and such." That's all he would say, and I would read, and I'll come back, and I do the great, very hard work. 2 years of very big. I've worked hard all my life, but that was 2 years of very hard work, learning a lot.
well, that doesn't come through in your book. From your book, I feel you just breeze through everything. But, uh, how on earth did you finish what was you're supposed to do in 4 years in 21 months? Uh, did you really slog away long hours, or is it just that you're super bright?
Like you were saying, what I had done in Bombay was helpful in doing the standard economics courses, which I had to. So I had to really do all my work on things I did not learn at Bombay, especially mathematics and statistics. And then I was also in a very happy situation of being attached to a research project upon arrival, which was a news. And so most of my fellow students didn't do that, but for me that was the most interesting part in my education. So I just concentrated on that, and luckily for me, I ended up doing a good PhD, and from a good man. So luck, but I guess yes, I worked hard every day. Let's put it that way. Sort of midnight to 7 o'clock in the morning, and then around the clock. But also, that was the atmosphere among graduate students. We all were working very hard.
Can you talk about your PhD? What was the subject?
Oh, well, it was how to stabilize the price of tin, which was an international commodity agreement, how to statistically model price movements and devise a stock policy which would buy when the price was low and sell when price was high, and how to do it mathematically and statistically. And mine was the first ever exercise in commodity price stabilization.
Really?
And it got published. So it is sort of one of, what's now be called simulation. I did the first computer simulation of a commodity model ever.
At that time, computers must have been very, very rudimentary, right?
Oh, I must tell you, I'm like a fossil. I did my PhD on the first computer ever built. It's called UNIVAC 1, which was designed in the Second World War. And the University of Pennsylvania, by some reason, got to store it. So it was a huge building. Really a huge building, and it had less power than your watches or your telephone has. We used to have tapes whirling around and banks of tapes, and we used to have to punch cards and things like that. No, so I did my PhD on the first big computer ever built, and so here I am still, and now people do things so much faster. But we thought it was very fast. 24 hours it took to get the calculation back, and we thought that was fantastic.
So that mathematical model that you devise, is that still in use?
Yeah, I mean, things have moved on, but there is a journal called Econometrica, which was the kind of premier journal for econometricians. I got published in that back in 1966. So it was, yes. Yeah, that's a kind of a standard model, but of course, things have moved on. And now, of course, there's so much data.
Yeah.
People do different things.
Right.
Luckily, I don't have to worry about it.
At the University of California in Berkeley, you met Amartya Sen and a lot of other Nobel Prize.
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
Was that intimidating, or was that something you took in your stride?
Well, the interesting thing was that I had a job and an income. And having a job was different from having an exam on your head. Different kinds, But also I had to work on my own. I also did another big modeling exercise for that. But then I had a lot of free time because there's no coursework, there's nothing else. And I fell in with the student, I appreciated the student troubles and appreciated the politics of it and the social life of it. No, it was a time when America was changing very fast.
Yes, there was a lot of activism. I think
a lot of, yeah.
That was a time of fervent. There was a Black Power movement, I think.
Absolutely.
Right?
I mean, what is happening today started over then. What people now talk about Black Lives Matter, but the first awareness of the problem of rights of Black Americans was at that time, and started with young people being rebellious and so on.
And you stood in picket lines and so on.
I stood in picket lines. Yeah, my natural instinct was for justice.
Yes. And then you went to London School of Economics, and that was again the 60s, as I was saying, a lot of ferment. May 1968,
Absolutely.
Paris. Then you write about the London School of Economics rebellion.
Yeah.
What was that about?
Well, that was about the big change in cultural attitude, where students were saying, we do not respect you just because you are our elders and you are our seniors. You have to earn the respect. And secondly, you have to consult us if it involves our lives. You cannot make decisions about our life. Now, that was a generational thing, post-war generation. People say, well, there was full employment, there was prosperity, people were less insecure, and the whole cultural revolution, the Beatles and all that kind of had happened. And so LSE students first revolted when the next director was appointed, and they said, we were not consulted. And people say, what do you mean you're not consulted? Why would we consult you, for God's sake? We are responsible elderly men. They're all men. And then the student found out things about the appointment which the elders had not found out. That is what broke it. What broke it was the students showed that these people had done a very shoddy job. And that broke. And I just naturally, partly because I was younger than most people, my sympathy was naturally with the rebellious students.
Yeah.
Again, I was not cautious.
You also write about the left wing being basically Stalinist.
Yeah.
That's quite a startling statement to make.
Well, in those, even in Bombay, the dominant political ideology for young people was left wing.
Right. It always is.
Communism, both in cinema and in people like Kosambi, so on. And, Shamlal Adib, who was editor of the Times of India for a while, he used to write columns. And so, we knew about the right wing, and so when I got to LSE, much more than in the US. In US, there was no formal left wing. There were radical people. but Trotskyism, Leninism, all that stuff was very, very British, very, very kind of bookish, and fighting about Soviet Union rather than about the neighborhood. But it is very interesting controversy about state capitalism and things like that.
And your sympathies were with whom?
My sympathies were with the non-Leninist left. I'll put it that way. I was never a communist. I never could be a non-democratic in a non-democratic party. Because I'm ultimately I'm a rebellious person. So I wanted to be a soft social democratic person, reformist, but not revolutionary.
And did you see that as a possibility for India at that time?
Oh, absolutely. No. In a sense, in India, there was, as I described, there was this kind of fake revolutionariness. Everybody talked about the revolution. Very, very privileged people, and I just could not sort of treat credibly people who claim revolutionarism were children of IAS officers or rich people. I thought, being politically rebellious, you had to kind of be out of the ruling class sort of culture. And because I was in England, I was on my own. I had to choose where I could be at. I had no parents to tell me anything at that time. My parents were far away, so my choice was no. I was not a revolutionary. I was not going to. I wanted the system to change for the better, but I didn't want to destroy the system.
Oh, you must talk about Human Development Index, because that's
Oh,
something that you were one of the founders, and that now is always quoted. People talk
absolutely.
about it all the time. So how did that happen?
Well, it is a practically the most creative thing I've done. Well, uh, it was Amartya Sen, of course. We were very good friends. We are very good friends, and he was asked to do something by the Latin American sort of countries because they were going through trouble. He had just lost his wife, and he was sort of under great pressure, children and all that, moved to Harvard. So he said, "Why don't you do this?" I said, "I would do this if you were also there." Anyway, as soon as people heard what we were doing, the New York headquarters took over. And so if you're developing a development index, do it for us. So that's how with Amartya and we ended up. Mahbubul Haq, who was Amartya's friend from Cambridge days, lovely person, former foreign minister of Pakistan and so on. So we just got into this, and the challenge was, can you measure development in a way which is not the traditional Western way, World Bank, IMF way, and it enhances other things. And it's really, you get sort of 7 or 8 intelligent people around a table, and of course with Amartya there. We got there, but from the beginning we were saying, no, it's not going to be national income. We got it in after, but let's start everything else. And so, and he of course was the moving thing. I had a measure, but it was too narrow. So what I ended up doing was I ended up polishing the index once we had set up the parameters. The Amartya wanted the index to say, like, how far it is to the top of the mountain. And I said, no, let's see how far we have come. We kind of changed, how far you have yet to go was a kind of still a challenge. But how far you have come was a sense of achievement.
Yes.
And it just changing that was sort of one thing, my contribution. And then I made other little changes. But because he was very active in the first round, we set it up. And then I went on bookkeeping. and improving it and things like that. So it is very nice because it became for many countries like one thing they could boast about. And Mahbubul Haq used to say that most of the time, he knows that every country doesn't really care about its own index, but it is favorite enemy's index. They have to be above the neighbor's index. And he says, I go to Morocco and I have to explain to them why Algeria is above them, that's all they care about, and India, Pakistan, and things like that. So in a sense, it became a part of the language of international diplomacy because it was easy to understand. And that's one thing Mahbubul Haq also had. He said, listen, you guys do technically whatever you have to do and do it right. It's my task to tell the story. So give me something that I can tell them a story about. And so Human Development Index has one, unlike any other concept, even the GNP, Human Development Index, you can explain to a prime minister at the street corner.
Have the parameters changed from what you had devised?
No, well, I don't know now. We had the three basic parameters of life expectancy, education enrollment, and a measure of income. I think lately I heard that they're doing something more on climate change, thing like that. But this is many years later. I did it for the first 11 years, and then I gave up because then I thought, no, this is really. Time has come for another generation to do what they have to do. But no, it is still a part of the language, and that is something substantial.
What made you join the Labour Party?
Well, as I said, if you want the world to change in a reformist way, not a revolutionary way, I was not on the right wing. I wanted the world to be better off. I wanted lesser poverty, less inequality, but in a kind of consensus building way. I knew that it's a compromise. To be in a moderate socialist party is a compromise. You always have to kind of concede. You progress step by step, small step by small step.
You could have continued as an academic. You didn't have to be in politics.
But I didn't give up being an academic. I throughout when I joined Labour Party in 1971. No, I mean my academic work continued, my political work continued. And my writing continued. I just do more work than most people.
Right. And you didn't see any conflict between the academic work and
No.
politics?
No. Well, in a sense, in the manual of London School of Economics staff manual, when I first read it, there was a condition saying what to do if you are going to become a member of parliament. In the staff manual, because basically Bertrand Russell wrote the staff manual, so rights of academic and so on. So there was always the idea in London School of Economics that it's an academic institution, but it was very politically conscious and active. So no, I never ever missed anything academically because of my political work. And as I say, even when I became a lord, when I was offered a reduction in my load, I said, no, the fact that I became a lord is not a tax on my colleagues.
Right.
I will do my full load and I will do House of Lords and we will just carry on.
And you had to choose the title.
Yes.
A lord is a lord of something, right?
Yes. I'm Lord of St. Clement Danes, and St. Clement Danes is the parish in which LSE is situated. There's a building called St. Clement's Building in which I had my office sometime, and St. Clement's sort of little. And I kind of thought, yes, that is a thing. I talked to I.G. Patel. I knew I had a title coming to me, and so he happened to be in UK that time. This is before he had become a director of LSE. He was at King's College, and I called him up and I said, I have to tell you this secret. I said, about taking the title, would you agree that I should not take an Indian title? He said, yes.
Why?
Don't take an Indian title.
You could have been Lord Desai of Baroda.
Of Baroda. I could have been Baroda. But no, he said, no, don't do that. You're English now. He said, now you're British. And I agreed with that. So I said, LSE is my background here, and therefore LSE should get a thing. But you see, what interesting thing is, if you're the first Desai, then you don't have to use your location. I'm Lord Desai, of course, officially of St. Clement Danes, but I'm Lord Desai. If there was a second Lord Desai, he would have to be Lord Desai of somewhere to distinguish him from me. So I'm the original Lord Desai.
I think for our viewers and listeners, you have to very briefly talk about this actual ceremony of becoming a Lord.
Yes, well, you have to be nominated by one of the political parties or by the Queen herself, but I was nominated by the Labour Party. After Mrs. Thatcher retired, she was not very favorable to Labour Party in giving us slots. But when John Major became Prime Minister, he and Neil Kinnock, the Labour Party, got together, and they wanted to add new blood, as it were. And they wanted to add people who were still in active work. We were called working peers. And so I was in that first list, and I was told I would get this, and it's very, very painful because you can't tell anybody, and you have to sort of wait for the thing to go through. And when I got through, it was great fun. Then I had to be installed. And for installation, I have to have two people already in the House of Lords, my friends from the LSE and Labour Party, to introduce me. And I had to put on ermine robes, which they gave me red robes. And so you walk through, one Lord in front of you, you in the middle, one Lord behind you. And then you go to this table, and a statement is read out, Elizabeth II, I invite my dearly beloved Meghnad Desai. And the man who had to read it out said, I practiced this last night very much. I didn't want to stumble on this name, And then I have to take an oath. You could swear an oath on the Bible or the Bhagavad Gita, or whatever it is, but being an atheist, I only affirmed an oath. I did not swear an oath. And then you have to sign an ancient document in which your name goes. And then we used to have a hat. We have to doff the hat to the speaker 3 times. And then we walk out and shake the speaker's hand. And the house says, here, here, welcoming. And it's a nice ceremony. But it really made you feel like you were entering a club, a special club, and there's got a little bit of mystique to it. Now they have simplified the ceremony, but the nicest thing was that nobody ever remarked about me being an Indian or anything like that. I was there because I was in a Labour Party, and I was not representing. I had more trouble explaining to the British Indians that I was not representing India in the House of Lords, that I was not there to defend the government of India's policies. It's a very difficult thing for people to understand. I said, I am actually a British Lord, and I'm here on British. I don't have constituents, but my main duty is towards my my party and the society I want to change.
Right. Did you, as a Lord, as being in the House of Lords, were you able to influence any of the policies, decisions, and so on?
Oh yes, in small ways. The one thing that I do, which is sort of unfinished business, as it were, is reforming the House of Lords.
Oh,
This is a long length movement, and I'm one of the people who was in a group which wanted to make the House of Lords elected
elected by
on
who?
a different basis from the House of Commons. But there is a great resistance, partly in the House of Commons. They fear that an elected House will get more power. They are the only elected House. So we have no power compared to them. We can discuss, we can improve legislation, and I've done lots of things in that respect. But we can't actually challenge their authority as a legitimate body. We have a lot of, as it were, glamour, but no authority. But so I did a lot of work on that, and then on things like student higher education, especially higher education finance. We have this student loan system, which we worked at LSE, and then So now, in the old days when I got there, they had about 15% of the cohort in higher education. Now it is 50%. It's a paradox. Despite having students having to take a debt, there's no barrier. So now 50% of the cohort. So I'm very proud of that. It's very controversial. And things like that. This is other things.
What about economic policies?
Well, in economic policies, I have twice been pulled up and told I was wrong because I was suggesting more taxation. You never say more taxation when you're in opposition. You never ever say more taxation until after you've done it. You always say, no, taxes are not going to grow up. And I had this idea that, no, I'm going to talk about how we must have a sort of more tax to have no budget deficit and so on. So that way, I twice embarrassed my party, and people say, "Oh my God, he's clever, but he's not safe. Not a safe pair of hands." But I can't claim my one. I am still arguing for a citizen's income, a basic income for all citizens wherever I go, and it may come in my lifetime. But that would be a really revolutionary change.
Basic income guaranteed by who? By the government.
By the government, and every voter would get it regardless of their income. One of the ideas came from Milton Friedman. He basically says, people who have income above the threshold, let's say you have a threshold of 1 lakh rupees and a 20% tax. In effect, the person making 1 lakh is getting a 20% concession on which there is no tax. But a person who makes 90,000 gets nothing. So the person with 90,000 should get what they call a negative income tax. He should get a reward. He shouldn't have to pay tax. He should get a reward to make it up to. And so it is, and there are other people having that idea. And I basically think that instead of having unemployment benefit and disability leave, also have a basic income guarantee. People who don't want it, who make too much money, they can say, well, I will include it in my tax or not take something. But it will amazingly sort of strengthen. A lot of women especially do unpaid work.
Right.
And I think those, at least, if you have a basic income, it should at least have basic income for women as the first step, because they are, at least in India, for example, India has the lowest proportion of labor force participation by women in the labor market, lowest in Asia. And I think nearly sort of 80% of women don't work for a wage. It would be a very good thing for government of India to do, give basic income to all women.
Well, I would like to talk about that, but we're running out of time because the questions coming in. So,
okay.
So let me go to one or two of them. Anita Ramesh says, you said you wanted to call your book Could Do Better. Which areas today do you feel you could have done better?
Well, my mother cried every time my results came out because she was disappointed. And I could, if I wanted to feel sorry for myself, saying, why haven't I got a Nobel Prize in economics? Well, I haven't, but that doesn't matter. I'm not spending sleepless nights about it. In a sense, you can always say, why haven't I got X? There's always X to get. I say no. Like I said in a Human Development Index, I'm happy how far I have come. I don't want to worry about how far I could yet go. Let me value the achievements I have rather than what I don't have. So I change it around.
I think it's a very positive way of looking at things.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I may not have everything, but I have something that let me value that.
Right. Umesh Navdev says, do you feel India is more cosmopolitan than the UK, having lived in both countries?
India is more?
More cosmopolitan. I suppose he means more varied or more.
Yeah, I mean, India is Europe. Yeah. India is not a country; it's a continent, a subcontinent. And Europe has fewer languages than India has. Right. When you think about it, and so India is vast. I have this somewhat unorthodox notion that India is a collection of nations. It's not a single nation; it's a collection of nations. And every language every region has its own history and all that. And the richness of India is absolutely amazing. I'm living in a small island. And it's nothing like the richness of India. And absolutely, there's no question about that.
Yeah. H. Sheikh asks for your comments on the recent human rights clause that MPs in UK have asked regarding trade in India. This is very recent.
I take absolutely no interest in that. I'll tell you why. I think it's no business of British MPs to ask about human rights laws in India. They should worry about human rights laws at home. And I'm always asked from India, why are they saying, why don't I said, listen, they want to say, they want to say it. It's nothing to do with India. Let them do whatever they want. India should ignore that. India should do its own human rights legislation, its own human rights concern. And if India can criticize British human rights. Who cares? But, in a sense, I personally myself think that it's an old imperial habit. People go on talking about everything else. India should not feel sensitive about that.
But Meghnad, in general, let's not talk about just India, but in general, suppose a country is abusing human rights, as has happened in many countries,
sure,
and very blatantly so, and there are a lot of dictatorships that do that. Then does the world just say it's not, we shouldn't interfere?
No, the world should criticize, I would criticize, but you see what happens in India? There is hypersensitivity only about the Western criticism. Only about mainly UK and US. Yeah. Why are they saying that? Now, I think, first of all, they're saying that because they can read about it. and so Indians can read about it as well. And they have issues with them. Like, for example, the US has enormous human rights problems. We should criticize them, they should criticize us. But ultimately, I don't think that we should say, oh, they shouldn't talk like that. Let them talk like that. But the fact that they're pointing it out is not a problem. Problem is we have to ask ourselves, is this a problem at home or not? And I think in India, what really happens is that there is a great desire to be praised by the West and not criticized by the West. I mean, we hardly know what the Japanese or the Thai or the Vietnamese are saying about India. We don't care. We care about, and this is a normal.
Yeah, yeah. N. Balakrishnan says, you spend time in 3 countries with different socio-economic cultures. What values did you take from each of these countries?
Well, I think India, of course, is part of my upbringing, my culture, I think my tolerance of diversity. America was a taste of how to deal with freedom and prosperity, but worry about inequality. I really became political in America much more than anywhere else. And I think in UK, I'd say I'm very happy that I spent my life in a meritocratic culture as an academic. I have only been judged on my merit.
Right.
And I have only ever had to, I have got everything I have as a right, and without having to go seek the favor of a superior or my MP or, and the freedom to be able to live your own life without any kind of obligations is a very liberating thing. The fact that both in America and in UK, I did not hesitate to protest.
Right.
I just didn't think about, this is not right, I'm going to go protest. I think in India, a lot of people feel, oh, but if I do that, somebody will, not give me a job or won't give me a promotion. That kind of thing is still there. I don't know how really it is. I've never worked in India, so, but that climate is still there. I have lived a life of freedom to rebel.
Yeah, yeah. So Noel Miranda says about Rebellious Lord, he says, your views on dissent. And I think the question is asked in view of what is happening in India, where dissent is now a bit out of favor.
Well, there's not enough time left to talk about that. But what I think that like what happened with the farmers' rebellion, India has this enormous capacity to be able to protest.
Yeah.
Partly because the great Mahatma Gandhi taught us, just sit down in the street, and that is your protest. And I think, yes, of course, there are a lot of things to complain about, a lot of things to worry about. I'm worried about this love jihad stuff. I don't like it, and I don't like the attack on the Dalits, especially Dalit women, and so on. And of course, there are injustices in India. There's none. But ultimately, I think India will get rid of the problems by itself. Because there are people, there are men and women who will protest at a cost to themselves. But there are people who do that. And, most of the laws which are there, actually, surprisingly, were the colonial laws, which were reintroduced after independence. So in a sense, it will require a change in the constitution to realize the freedom that was implicit I want, if I was in India, I would start in a movement for the original constitution, the constitution which was finished in 1949 November.
Right.
That was the one most liberating constitution. It's gone, and very few people know this. And I would start that, but I'm not going to do that because I'm not good. But
So
that would be my move.
You're saying without all the amendments which came afterwards.
Without amendment, the first amendment introduced by Pandit Nehru reintroduced all the British rules of treason and all that, whatever.
Okay, we are out of time, but I'll ask you a last question myself.
Sure.
As an economist, how do you see the future of India?
Well, I think the last 2 years have been bad for India. But India will ultimately come through, partly because despite governments, India has enormous talents in its people. I mean, when you think about in terms of, say, cybernetics, digital technology, the inventiveness of Indian young Indians who have gone into e-commerce or who have gone into devising games and sort of devices. It's so amazing how much they can do. And the fact that Sundar Pichai is running a big multinational corporation, that says, listen, there's no shortage of talent in this country. Yeah. And despite all the obstacles, it has come this far, especially in the last 25 years. And I think it will go a lot further in the next 25 years. I have no doubt about that. It will be a bumpy ride. There's never going to be a smooth ride in India or anything. But then, to have, 1 billion people with a democracy, the only country to have a democracy, universal adult franchise from the beginning, which America doesn't have today. America doesn't have universal adult franchise today. India started at the beginning, and we have to value that achievement. Whatever else matters, India is rich in its politics.
Well, on that optimistic note, I think we'll end this very, very interesting conversation. Thank you so much, Meghnad Desai.
Thank you very much, Anil. Great pleasure.
And I urge everyone to get this book and read it. I think it's a very modest book considering all your achievements. And I'm really looking forward to a sequel with your philosophy and your thought.
Will do. I will take that as an order.
Okay.
I will take that as an order.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anil. Take care. Yeah.
And thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you all. Thank you all your friends and staff who have made this possible. Thank you.